Good morning and welcome back to Football League World TV. We are going under the microscope this morning and looking ahead to Friday night's clash between Watford and Burnley. Two sides recently relegated from the Premier League, but looking to make a statement in the race for automatic promotion already in the Sky Bet Championship. I'm your host, Alfie Burns, and I'm delighted to be joined by my two colleagues, Marcus and Ned. Marcus, how are you this morning?
Yeah, really well. Thanks, Alfie. Good to see Watford on Sky Sports Watford again on Friday evening. But no, it's going to be an interesting match all the same. They weren't quite as impressive, I think, in their last match. But yeah, it's always interesting to see how the newly relegated sides get on, particularly against each other with two new managers in the dugout as well. So excited to get into this one.
Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about. Ned, how are you getting on?
Yeah, all good, mate. Thanks. I sort of echo Marcus's comments there. Excited to see how these two sort of fare after, impressive starts to the season. But I think we've certainly seen some early limitations of both. So this one should be a really good test of exactly where they are at this point.
We're streaming across Facebook, YouTube and Twitter as usual this morning. So any Watford or Burnley fans want to get themselves in the comments and join in the debate, please do. Any EFL fans just want to give their general thoughts on Watford and Burnley, maybe the business that they've done in the transfer window or whether they think they're going to bounce back into the Premier League, please do get in touch. It would be great to hear from you. We'll kick things off just by reflecting on what's gone on so far with both Watford and Burnley since they've dropped back down into the Championship. We'll start with the home side, Watford. They've got 4 points on the board from a possible 6. A 1-0 victory over Sheffield United on the opening weekend of the season was backed up by a 1-1 draw with West Brom on Monday. In terms of points for Rob Edwards, it's not looking too bad, is it, Marcus? But you touched on it right at the top of the show there, that the performance against West Brom maybe left a little bit of room for concern.
Yeah, they were so sound defensively in their first game against Sheffield United, winning the game on the counter attack, that I probably expected a little bit more from them at the Hawthorns. But the Baggies were able to establish an impressive amount of control on the game, and really probably should have been in front before Sars Worldy. So yeah, there's been, although it's a very positive points total, as you point to, 4 points from 2 games, given the quality of the opposition they've played, I think Edwards will be very happy with that. I think there's been shades of the 2020-21 season already just in these 2 games, with a team that's not really wholly convincing but has the individual quality to bail them out at times if they are able to get a foothold in games. I do feel for Edwards a little bit with the uncertainty of the type of players that he's going to be able to rely on maybe beyond the coming weeks. But yeah, I think that he would have taken this start already, definitely points-wise. But yeah, that they couldn't really have had any complaints if they left the Hawthorns empty-handed the other night. It was maybe a little bit disappointing from a Watford point of view to not see them build on that impressive display against the Blades in their first outing. But still quite a lot of new signings. You got to remember that they were playing under Roy Hodgson for the majority of the second half of last season. So it's quite a difference in style. And there is a similar core of the squad, really, that was playing a very different brand of football as well. So yeah, on the whole, it's been very positive due to the points total, but definitely, as you point to, plenty of food for thought after that performance at West Brom.
What are your thoughts on Watford then so far, Ned?
Yeah, I think Marcus sort of hit the nail on the head there. There's obviously positives. If you look at, Rob Edwards would have sort of shaken your hand off you offering 4 points from opening 2 games against Sheffield United and West Brom. But if it's the start of a new era, it's always going to take a bit of time. As Marcus said, we've spoken so much. Well, everyone has spoken so much about this new brand of football at Burnley and how that they're having to adapt and, everything there. But as Marcus says, it's a change of style as well for Watford, who have been used to sort of not being in the ascendancy in games. But yeah, last weekend, on Monday rather, you've got to say they were really lucky. I think they conceded an XG of 3.06, which shows you just how many good chances they conceded. West Brom obviously just couldn't put them away. The good news, I guess, is that there's not really been much sign of a sort of relegation hangover. But the issue they face is, as Marcus said, is similar to the last time they came down, which is, they've not been wholly convincing in games. It's really been sort of about that quality, that Premier League quality they do have, winning games for them. And So it's going to be interesting, really, here to see if that can do that again, or we see a bit more progress toward the style of football you'd imagine Rob Edwards will want to play.
Let's move over to Burnley then. An identical points total, 4 points from 6 so far. They picked up 3 points at Huddersfield on the opening weekend of the season and backed that up with a 1-1 draw against Luton. Two very different but two equally challenging fixtures for the start of the Vincent Kompany era. Ned, I'll come to you first with this one. Have you been impressed by them under the former Manchester City captain?
I think it's impossible not to be impressed given the number of high-profile players that left and the amount of squad turnover. And you know, this, I'm sure supporters of other clubs are starting to get a bit wound up about people talking about the revamp at Burnley and the change in style. And obviously it's an easy thing to lean on given the reputation they had under Sean Dyche and the direct style of play. It's obviously been hugely impressive what he's been able to implement and that they've become such a better team to watch and the control they've had in games. But, you know, I think we saw versus Luton and at times versus Huddersfield Town that they're not the finished article yet. They certainly lack that clinical edge in the final third. It was always going to take a bit of time. I think 4 points from these first two games, you'd probably say Kompany would take them after that Huddersfield win. He will have been disappointed not to come away with 3 points against Luton. But again, just because of how impressive that Huddersfield win was, we shouldn't forget the amount of change this summer and the time it might take for a new manager to really bed his ideas. So yeah, certainly impressive, but we have seen the limitations that are there. Let's
just compare the two clubs then. I mean, they've both come down out of the Premier League and had a change in management. It's been a big rebuild at Burnley, where the sort of the heart of their defence has been ripped out. They've lost forwards as well, the key players like Maxwell Cornet and Dwight McNeil. Whereas Watford have retained a lot of the talent that they had in the Premier League. Marcus, do you think we're kind of looking at two squads here? One that is very much on the way to have been completely rebuilt, and another one that within the sort of final 3 weeks of the transfer window could be dismantled?
Absolutely. Excuse me. I was going into the season expecting there to be a more sort of dragged out transition period with Burnley rather than Watford. But I think the way they've handled their outgoing business and almost allowing the players that they thought were possibly going to move on earlier on in the window, even before the fixtures started, has put Kompany in a good position to sort of instill the ideas that he wants to, and with a group of players that he knows he can largely rely on, a high percentage of them at least, than what Edwards can at Watford with the uncertainty around the players, particularly at the top of the pitch. Personally, I expect Joao Pedro to stay, and I think it's probably a case of whether Emmanuel Dennis and both Emmanuel Dennis and Ismail Assar leave, or just the one. But potentially with the way the transfer windows have been in the last few years, that's probably something that is going to plague them for the next few weeks, right up until the deadline. And then there'll be a point for Edwards to sit back and reassess what he's got and the best way to utilise that. So yeah, I definitely think Burnley are further ahead of them and have been able to conduct themselves a little bit better in getting organised and assembling the squad for the season. But yeah, I think when you see the quality that Watford could potentially retain in their squad compared to that of Burnley, though they do have some impressive individuals, if even though there could be some uncertainty off the pitch in the next few weeks, if Edwards is able to head into the bulk of the September fixtures with one of Dennis or Sarr still at the club, I think that they're in a very advantageous position.
Let's dive into some of the key battles that we might see on Friday. Then one that stands out that I think we need to lead with is the quality within that Watford front three. We've spoken about Sarr, Dennis and Pedro already, and it's quite a new look Burnley defensive unit. Charlie Taylor at left centre back, Taylor Howard-Bellis, although he's played a lot of championship football, is still very young. A new left back at the club, and of course Connor Roberts on the right. Ned, do you think that that's a key battle?
Yeah, I think it's a massive one, and we know from what we've seen from the two clubs so far that Burnley are likely to sort of control possession, even though it is, you know, being played at Watford. I think we'll go on to talk about it in a bit, I'm sure, but that Watford midfield have struggled a bit, and they're coming up against, you know, one of the best midfield units in the division, in the likes of Cork, Cullen, and Brownhill. But what that is going to do is likely mean that they're going to be pushed fairly high up, and that's going to leave space in behind. We know that Maatsen and Roberts, as impressive as particularly Maatsen has been, we know they're going to be asked to push really high up, and there's going to be spaces for Pedro, for Sarr, for Dennis to exploit it in that sense. And it's going to come down to the likes of Charlie Taylor and Harwood Bellis at times in transition, in how they deal with those players bursting through. We talked sort of previously about Watford having that quality to be able to win games, even when they're not on top. And this is a prime example of it. 3 players that a Premier League quality forward line, really. And it looks as though they're going to get opportunities with Burnley likely pushing players up the pitch, those fullbacks up the pitch. And it's going to be really down to how well those 2 centre-backs particularly, and perhaps Roberts, if he's hanging back a bit more, can deal with that front 3.
Ned sort of touched on it there, Marcus, but the Watford midfield on Monday night seemed particularly soft, and I know that they're looking to make additions, and they have made additions since then. But given how compact Company's been setting up Burnley's midfield, they've got a lot of bodies in there, a lot of ball players. They'll dominate possession. They broke lines very, very well against Huddersfield in their last away game. Do you think that that's going to be something that Watford are really going to have to be mindful of on Friday?
Yeah, it's a huge dilemma for Rob Edwards. If you lose the midfield battle, it's very difficult to win a football match. And with Jack Cork, Josh Cullen and Josh Brownhill starting so well at the start of this season, I think that's definitely an area that you look at both sides, and it's where potentially you give Burnley the upper hand. Whether Edwards can address that in his team selection, I think he probably can. But it's does he want to accommodate the front 3? The star-studded front 3 at Vicarage Road, and sort of gamble on Kayembe and cleverly holding their own against the Clarets' midfield trio. I definitely think Ian Maatsen is a particular potential weakness defensively that Edwards could look to really get at. We've spoken about the front 3, but I think at right wing back for Watford playing inverted, Hassan Kamara is definitely a player that could cause some damage, maybe in combination with whoever's playing in front of him on the right wing, and really forcing Ian Maatsen back. I think Kamara is a player that definitely shouldn't be playing in the Championship. I think he won Watford's Player of the Season last year and has been a very solid fullback in Ligue 1 over the years. So I think that's potentially a problem area that Company will be looking at. And then even looking inside Maatsen, you've got Charlie Taylor, who's of course not a specialist centre-back. So I think that's a potential problem area and one part of the pitch that the Hornets could look to exploit, although that's probably not as crucial as in central midfield. So I think Edwards could potentially sacrifice one of that front 3 to get another midfielder in there just to try and battle up against the ball players, as you rightly mentioned. Josh Cullen has really looked impressive so far and uses the ball so intelligently, and Brownhill getting off the mark against Luton as well. I think that's definitely an area of the pitch that Company will be looking at and thinking that they might be able to get one up on Watford.
Plenty to debate in terms of the battles on the big green rectangle then. But what about in the dugouts? We've got 2 new managers here that have taken very, very different paths to get to this point, Rob Edwards and Vincent Kompany. I'll stage this question to both of you. Coming to you first, Ned. Who would you rather have in the dugout at this moment in time, and why?
It's a tough one, really, but I think I'm leaning a bit toward Rob Edwards here. I mean, obviously, if he's not going to get the time as Watford seems to be saying he will, then probably perhaps Company's the better option. But I think what Edwards did at Forest Green, absolutely phenomenal, of course. And if he gets the opportunity and the patience to do that, I feel like he could be a real success at Watford. For me, there's just a few too many question marks about Vincent Kompany at this point in his career. What we really have to base it on is sort of 2 games at the start of this season and 2 seasons in which Anderlecht finished 3rd in the Belgian top flight. I think he reached a cup final as well last season, but it's really early days for Kompany, and I just think Rob Edwards is such a highly regarded coach. Obviously, what Company's done already in changing the play style has been hugely impressive, but I just don't know yet if we know that Vincent Kompany is a coach that can finish the job. we saw at Forest Green that Rob Edwards can do that, and for me, that's why he edges it.
I can see you nodding your head there, Marcus. Let's have your thoughts.
I agree with Ned. Probably a little bit more bullish about Rob Edwards over Vincent Kompany, to be honest. Obviously, it's a small sample size, but just looking at his coaching background and the body of work that he's been able to put together compared to Kompany, who is in this position because of his playing career. If it wasn't for that, he wouldn't be Burnley manager right now. I've really liked the way the Watford players, in particular, have been speaking about Edwards very highly. Even those with links to moves away have been keen to give him a lot of credit for the impact that he's had this summer. Obviously, the season that they had last term as well was much worse than Burnley's. Burnley sort of competed against the drop where Watford were absolutely nowhere near it. So it was almost a more difficult situation to take over in that respect. So yeah, I think he's earned the right a little bit more than Kompany has. Obviously, the start's been so impressive from the Belgian, and he may well go on to prove me wrong and have the Clarets right up there for the length of the season. But I think right now, given the credit in the bank that Edwards got from his roles in the England youth ranks, I think he was Wolves under-23 manager as well, and then of course at Forest Green, he's definitely got a little bit more pedigree as in a coaching capacity at the moment.
Albeit under very different circumstances, these two sides did meet twice last season. A goalless draw at Turf Moor in the Premier League, and then Burnley winning 2-1 at Vicarage Road back in April, a comeback win at that point for the Clarets. So we'll get some predictions for this game now. Come to you both again. Ned, I'll let you go first. What's your prediction for Friday night's game between Watford and Burnley?
Slightly boring, I guess, but I'm going with a 1-1 draw. I see sort of Burnley controlling the game and dominating sort of between the two boxes, Cullen and Cork, winning that midfield battle. I'll be honest, I fully respect the career he's had, but I'm not sure Tom Cleverley is really up to it at Championship level. I've been pretty disappointed with the way he's sort of struggled with the pace of games. And are you really going to ask new signing Hamza Chowdhury to come in and have an impact straight away? I'm not sure he really pushes the balance in the midfield in their favour yet. But I'm just not sure Burnley are quite the finished product in the final third either. I'm not sure that they've got the players to be clinical. I'm not convinced Ashley Barnes is the right striker to fire them to promotion. I'd like to see sort of a change there. And I do think going the other way, Watford have got the quality to punish Burnley. I think if Watford give up the chances that we saw the other week, it's about whether Burnley can really put those away. I'm not hugely convinced that we've seen enough that they can. So that sort of leaves me to sort of land on a 1-1 draw. Perhaps if Chowdhury comes in, has a huge effect, that helps Watford sort of sneak this one. Or if Burnley put away more of their chances, that then they come away with 3 points. But I think probably a point each is how it's going to end. And I think probably the manager would take that.
And how about you, Marcus?
Sitting on the fence again. I can't bank on Burnley keeping a clean sheet given the quality of Watford's attacking unit, and I think the two fullbacks, but definitely one in particular that's probably a specialist wing back and in Ian Martson, who can contribute more in the attacking third than the defensive one. But at the same time, maybe a bit of recency bias creeping in. I really can't back Watford to win the game after their performance at the Hawthorns, and I do expect Burnley to establish quite a lot of control. It's whether they can avoid getting ripped apart on the counter-attack, because Watford will not need a second invitation to do that, as we saw against Sheffield United. So I'm going to agree with Ned and go for a 1-1 draw. Could be more entertaining than that, but I'm going to pick both sides to stay unbeaten 3 games in.
That concludes our look at Friday night's game between Watford and Burnley. Thanks to Ned and Marcus for their thoughts, and thanks to anybody that's joined us across Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. Plenty more previewing of the EFL action this coming weekend on the channel tomorrow with our 2 staple shows, the EFL Betting Show and the EFL Weekend Preview. So plenty to discuss. Please do join us for that. But between now and then, take care.